My name is David Smith, and I'll be your host for today's session. But before we get started, there's some general housekeeping items I'd like to step through for today's virtual session. The audio for today's session is through your computer speakers. That said, you may want to consider using a headset or earbuds for better sound quality. And to help us minimize the amount of distractions that we have throughout today's session, we have turned off all the participants' cameras and muted all the microphones. That said, you may want to consider either shutting down your own personal devices or maybe put them on mute just to avoid any distractions from your own personal workspace. We will have a dedicated question and answer period at the end of today's session, and we encourage you to ask your questions as you think of them. And we'll try to work through as many of your questions as we can throughout today's session. To ask a question, you may use what we call the chat feature, and that's located up in your ribbon or your menu. You can type in your questions there, and we'll get to them when we have the opportunity. There's a couple other features in that chat that I want to kind of step through as well. If you have any messages that you want to pass along or any thoughts, you can type them into that chat feature. But please keep in mind the chat feature is a public platform, and what you type in there can be seen by all the participants. There's also the reactions item in there as well. So you can instantly engage, or you can put in clapping hands or a thumbs up or a smiley face, anything like that. We will have a few polling questions throughout today's session. We're going to bring those polling questions across through the chat. Depending on your organization's security system for your computer, you may not be able to answer the polling questions. If that's the case, you may want to consider answering the polling questions in the chat feature. Also, if you are experiencing technical difficulties, please type them in the chat feature, and we have a team behind us that will help you with the technical aspect of today's session. Like right now, I can't move the screen forward, so there we go. Two other features I want to step through with the Microsoft Teams, and one is being the opportunity to turn on the live captions. To do so, you go to the More Actions Items menu, which is the three dots located in your top ribbon. You scroll down to where it says Language and Speech, and then you can turn on Live Camera. And if you're like me, you like to view things in full screen mode. To do so, you go to the View in your top ribbon, scroll down to where it says More Options, and you can click on the full screen mode. To turn off these features, you simply follow the same instructions. Prior to the pandemic, we used to facilitate and host what we called network knowledge exchanges. And we did these at various locations throughout the province. And it gave us an opportunity to interact with industry peers like yourself, but it was on a smaller platform. During the pandemic, we wanted to continue on with this program, and we still want to remain connected with industry peers like yourself. But we switched over to the virtual platform, and what we learned from it was that it gave us an opportunity to expand and increase our reach to a broader sector of individuals and companies throughout the province of Ontario. So we have people on today's call from all over the province and also from different sectors as well. But we also recognize too that it gave individuals like yourself an opportunity to participate and attend today's session through the safety of your own personal workspace, and also minimize the amount of travel as well. That said, we encourage you to learn what you can from today's session and take away what you feel of value and share that with your colleagues that you work with. Now, it gives me great pleasure to introduce a couple of individuals that will be helping us out for today's session. We have Mr. Adam Moffat, who is the Executive Director from the Ontario Tire Dealers Association, and Adam's been involved in the tire industry for decades, and he brings a wealth of knowledge. And also, we have the host, the facilitator for today's session, Mr. Aidan Robertson, who is a Senior Health and Safety Consultant with Workplace Safety and Prevention Services and resides up in the Sudbury area. And he has a diverse experience in a variety of sectors, including healthcare, emergency services, manufacturing, retail, and other services as well. And he understands the need to be creatively engaged in health and safety, and understands the principles and work behind it in order to reduce injuries and improve safety quality. That said, Aidan, what are we going to be talking about today in today's information session?
Much appreciated, Dave. Good morning, everybody. It's nice to see so many people here as well. So we'll just grab control back of that. And so, yeah, as Dave said, we're here with Adam, and you find folks, all members of the Ontario Tire Dealers Association, the OTDA. And if you're coming to us from another, a type of industry as well, if you're a common, participant in these online safety connections, welcome aboard. I promise you'll still get something out of this as well. The focus of today's session, and I want to reinforce that we're running a series of 3 sessions. This is the first of those 3, so we're kicking it off, and we really do want to focus on, the common challenges that we understand that you as tire dealers faced and potentially other seasonal occupations face with regards to that type of workforce. What are the common challenges that you face when onboarding seasonal workers? We'll talk a bit about the core health and safety requirements related to worker training. We'll talk about training best practices, and in the purpose of today's session, we'll discuss opportunities to try and integrate some effectiveness and efficiency into your training, because I know, Adam, we were chatting before the session. We're coming up on mid-September. Tire change season is upon us. It's going to ramp up very quickly. You're likely going to be faced with a large number of seasonal workers. Some you may not have met before, some might be returning. But how do you make sure that everyone on your floor, whether the seasoned worker or somebody who's doing something for the first time, has the ability to remain safe doing that work, knows what they're supposed to do, knows when they're supposed to do it, and ultimately knows how to do these jobs safely. Before I digress there a little bit, I mentioned that this is the first of 3 sessions. So the purpose of today's session, we want to talk about this for the next hour, talk about the challenges faced onboarding seasonal workers as a general topic, some strategies that you can integrate in to not take you as potential managers, supervisors, or even workers away from the work that needs to be done because of the heightened workload that comes with this time of year. But again, to also ensure that people are able to do that job safely. The second session coming up a month from now in October, we'll be talking about effective supervision. What does that look like in the context of this type of workforce of such a seasonal nature? And in the third session as well, with these types of seasonal workers, potentially foreign workers, maybe some language barriers there. How do you empower these workers with the knowledge of their rights and responsibilities under the Health and Safety Act here in Ontario to bring forward concerns when those concerns do arise, whether that be related to hazards or questions they have about the work to be done. So let's get into this right away here. And yeah, as Emily, thank you, has put that in the chat there. If you do want to register for those following sessions, please go right ahead. The links are there. But I do want to kind of get a sense of who we've got here with us today. How would you describe your business? Are you small, medium, or large in size? We typically categorize them based on your number of workers. Are you a franchise type of tire dealer association, maybe a car dealership, a vehicle manufacturer, or dedicated mechanic shop? Are you independently operated? I'd like to hear from you in the room. So far, we've got a few who are on the larger side of things, greater than 50 workers. Okay. Trying to see here, you can pick more than one answer as well. So for example, if you're small and independently operated, or medium and franchised, you can select both of those as well. But getting a few answers more on the larger side of things. So again, we're typically 5 answers here, larger than 50 workers. We've got 1 independently operated. Okay, over 600 persons in our group. Awesome. Okay, so we're talking some larger organizations here. And again, if you are on the smaller side or the medium side, I will speak to that as well. But this helps me kind of contextualize some of the discussion that I can have with you here. Appreciate that. We'll move on from there. So I'm not going to belabor this point. I've already mentioned, you're here because tire season is upon us. Just hit me the other day taking my car in for service, and I realized, I should probably get the winter tires and plan to take those and get those changed over as well. It's an interesting occupation and a type of workplace with regards to this type of work, given that you've got multiple seasons. It's not the hockey season, which runs from November to May. You've got your tire changeover for the winters, from summers to winters, and you've got the changeover seasons for the winters to summers. So biannually, you've got this greater period of work, and understandably, and I'm sure you can commiserate and empathize with each other on this, I certainly can as well. During that time, you're faced with extreme, I said high tier, but let's be serious, extreme time and workload pressures. There's a lot of fatigue, there's a lot of stress that your workers are under. This is heavily manual work. We're talking handling large pieces of rubber and aluminum or steel here, multiple, times for one vehicle, hundreds of times a day. It's a lot of wear and tear on the human body. That's just on the physical side of things. Psychosocially, that workload pressure, that time, that can we fit something else in? Are you able to jump over here on this? Can you pick something up that you've never done before? There's a lot of pressure that these workers and these workplaces are under, and we'll want to empathize with that in terms of, how do we plan to train these workers knowing that that's what they're going to be getting into? And again, on top of that, as I said before, you may be faced with seasonal workers with limited or no experience with this. You may not employ a full contingent that you roster, for lack of a better term, during those changeover seasons when you're outside of those. That's understandable from a business perspective. So, but with that in mind, how do you equip those temporary seasonal type workers for success, and to make sure that they can work through that season, meet the demands of the work, do it safely, and thrive doing so? Why we want to talk about this in particular is that we would categorize these types of seasonal workers within this overall category of new, young, or temporary type of workers, which we kind of overall generalize as well as what we call vulnerable workers here in Ontario. And when we say vulnerable, we do mean that, in that they're statistically 4 times more likely to be injured during the first month of work relative to someone who's been in that position for 6 months or a year. And we know that the sales, service, and labor sectors show high rates of lost time injuries. These are those sectors in which there's high workload demands, there's high time pressures. People want things done, and they want them done yesterday. So how do we deliver upon that? Understandably and unfortunately, in those types of scenarios, we see injuries happen to workers for a variety of reasons. Why do we see that, though? Well, if we're talking new, young, temporary workers, if you're one of these workers themselves, do some self-reflection. If you've been young before, which we all have, you've all started a job for the first time. Think back to those first couple days and weeks on a job. What could set you up for, I don't want to say failure, but for likelihood of injury? You're eager to impress. If I'm starting somewhere new, I want to show my best. I want to be able to, absorb everything. I want to be able to do what's expected of me competently. And then there's other pieces on top of that for young workers in particular, or even people new to a workplace. You might not have seen things go wrong before, or you might not experience any sort of injury before. You may just have what we call a low risk perception. This, some people call it that young invincibility mindset, where hey, it won't happen to me. I know that it does happen, but it won't happen to me because I'm careful and I'm safe, and I'll make sure that doesn't happen to me. Well, that's what we all say until it does happen to us. And that's what we want to respect the hazards inherent in the work. And starting somewhere new, you may not have seen or know about those types of things that happen. And when we talk about onboarding and training these types of workers, as we'll talk about shortly, that's one of the things we really want to bring to the forefront. Fear of speaking up for a number of reasons. Again, this idea of being eager to impress, newly into an organization, newly hired, excited to have a paying job, to get to work and to make that paycheck. But also, culturally, there's some other factors there as well. Whether or not you have workers who come from a culture where it's not socially or culturally acceptable or respectful to speak up to a person in position of power like that, to raise a concern, or this could be related to language barriers, or just as we'll talk about. I like to bring it back to the why. Limited or just no understanding of the the rights that workers have here in Ontario. The fact that they they have the classic the 3 main rights: the right to refuse unsafe work, the right to participate in their own health and safety. Excuse me, sorry, I'm swallowing there. So I want to get to the good stuff. Ultimately, one of the big whys, and the reason why I wanted to tailor the session around this today, independent of all these factors that we know are present, we can directly affect as workplaces, you as managers, as supervisors, as people in positions to train these seasonal workers. Inadequate information, instruction, and supervision can allow some of these other risk factors to lead to these injuries happening. And when I say that, I'd like to review this for anybody that hasn't seen this before. This is in the health and safety world, reasons why injuries occur, or what we call losses here on this end. This is where, hey, something bad happened that we didn't want to happen. In the case here, somebody's gotten hurt at work when we didn't want them to. We shouldn't go in with that intent. Why did that happen? We can trace that back. It's because some root cause analysis. If we want to look at why an incident occurred, we'll go this way. We'll see, what was the loss? What was the event happening? What was happening at the time of the event, whether that's work practices, at-risk behaviors, or the conditions of the work. But the message here is that everything does relate back to the system that people have to operate in. The system itself, the roles and responsibilities of those therein, and following the rules, working within that system. I somewhat jokingly say, but it's very serious. It's all well and good if you have, policies and procedures on paper, but if people aren't respecting those, if people aren't following through on those, if people aren't, using those things that are designed and meant to allow them to work safely, then they're not worth the paper they're written on. We need to, improve that system and these key elements there, that in information, instruction, and supervision, to ultimately prevent similar things from happening over and over and over again. I like to focus on this because, historically, there's been a lot of people typically stop looking at this part here, where, hey, somebody made a choice that led to them getting hurt. That might be a valid factor in some incidents, but ultimately we can trace that back to some system elements. What in the workplace that worker was working in who got hurt led to them getting hurt, or how was that environment set up such that it allowed a worker to be able to get hurt in the way that they did. I'll post this for a chat question if you want to come into the chat there, because I want to get to some of the good stuff. You're all here to learn about what you can do in this high pressure environment. So, in your experience, are there any other reasons why new, young, temporary, these vulnerable workers are more likely to be injured at work in the automotive tire service industry, in your experience? Any thoughts, any feelings from those we've got in the room? And again, some of the things we talked about before were, this eager to impress, it won't happen to me, invincibility, fear of speaking up, intimidation, these types of things. Any thoughts, anything from the group there? And for this, you can use the chat box. And if not, I'll just be flattered that I tried to create a comprehensive list there.
Aidan, I just want to mention something as well.
Yeah.
One thing that comes to mind when we talk about this, especially with new workers and maybe new to the province, is their workplace culture that they came from, and what that workplace culture was. And now they have to adjust to a new workplace culture in the province of Ontario. And there's knowledge, right? Knowing the three rights, but knowledge also has to be accompanied by wisdom. So wisdom is, how do you apply those rights? And that has to be something that has to be learned over a period of time.
Yeah. And that's what we'll get to it. And we talk about, it's all well, like we talk about, I know I have the right to refuse unsafe work, but what does that actually look like in the moment when I'm, sensing something, I'm getting that sick feeling in my stomach that I'm a little worried there. I might, catch my finger or catch my sleeve, catch something or hurt myself doing, what does that actually look like? I know I've got the right to refuse to do that if I think it's unsafe, but how? And if I come from a culture where, if I raised a concern, then I was just going to be sent out the door, I'm much less likely to do that, especially if I don't know I have that right here in the province from the get-go. So I always like to bring it back to the why. Ultimately, we're going to talk about, you're all here of the best intentions to want to train people, set them up for success. We don't want people to get injured. Legally, that is a requirement here in Ontario. And I think that's pretty powerful in and of itself. As we just talked about, there's other jurisdictions where, employers are allowed to operate where, not having to have as the same level of care for the workers that they're having to do the work for them. This idea of providing information, instruction, and supervision to workers for their protection is core to the Health and Safety Act here in Ontario, and really comes down to this concept of due diligence. What information do we provide workers through policies, procedures, documentation, the knowledge that is available to them for their use to do the work that they need to do. What sorts of strategies do they have to be able to reference that information in the moment when they need to use it? I forget this step of the process. Am I supposed to connect this or disconnect this or unpower this piece of equipment here? If I can't quickly and easily access that information or even ask somebody, then I'm likely to take a chance and potentially injure myself. Instruction. How do we equip people with that knowledge? How do we train them? This is typically what we call that. How do we educate them on how to perform the work we're asking them to do safely, and train them to do that work safely through whatever means are necessary, as we'll talk about. And supervision. We tell people what we want them to do. We train them how to do it that way. And then ultimately we need to monitor. People make mistakes. People forget things. We slip, we lapse. Just think about yourself. I'd be remiss if I didn't think on a daily basis. All of us likely forget something, probably very minuscule, but we're not perfect. We're fallible. Things come up, as we've talked about. In a high stress environment like this, your focus and these workers' focus may get drawn to the mountain of work in front of you and just wanting to see that through to the end and just get it done. And kind of unconsciously or subconsciously, slips happen, mistakes are made, or in a more negative sense, sometimes we see shortcuts taken and consciously taken. That's another type of issue that we want to get in front of. But again, these three buckets need to work in tandem to effectively, make sure workers are set up for success. This idea of appropriate and adequate information, instruction, and supervision. And on the supervisor end of things, these two pieces are really critical. If we look at this previous slide here, we're talking about the employer. So, if we look at the 600 persons in your group, your fairly large auto groups, I would consider that corporately to be the employer. Information-wise, how are we going to expect this work to be done at each of our locations? And then really more of a boots on the ground perspective, the supervisors, the team leads, whatever you call them, anybody who's in the position of directing work, giving workers tasks, and training workers on how to do that work safely, we're going to bucket them in this category of a supervisor. If you want to have conversations about what is a supervisor, what isn't a supervisor, we can definitely have that conversation. But these roles are absolutely critical in every workplace in Ontario to make sure on this monitoring and compliance end of things, are workers doing the work in the way that we train them to do, with a focus on safely performing that work. And there's plenty of good reasons why. I saw one of the comments in the chat here about, I think it was the question before, about workers not knowing how to use the tools. Absolutely, that is core to the message that we're trying to get across from this with regards to adequate training. If you're going to allow somebody or expect somebody to use a tool to serve a workplace purpose, you need to teach them how to do it and how to do it safely. And on a variety of ends, it's not just tools. As you can see here, common across tire dealers. And please let me know if I missed anything here. I tried to be quite comprehensive. Just a list: tire changers, balancers, impact wrenches, angle grinders, jacks, jack stands, vehicle lifts, variety of chemicals, the psychosocial factors as well. Like I said, the customers, the workload, physical agents like noise, vibration, heat, and cold. The environment itself, you've got moving vehicles, people mulling about, you've got housekeeping. We were talking before, there's constantly materials and stuff in flux, stuff is getting moved around. It's being stored in one spot for a few minutes and then moved where it needs to go. This needs to be considered, especially if these things are, I'm just going to set this down in a walkway and here I am, somebody else is coming by holding a large tire that obstructs my view. I'm expecting a clear walkway. If it's not, then that's going to cause issues. Any other thoughts here? Are there any other hazards that you can think of? Did I put a question there for that? No. Any other hazards that I didn't note here that, affect these vulnerable workers? And I just want to reflect, if you think to yourself here, all of these could create some pretty serious harm. And all of these, if we look at, the principle of an act, if we recognize a hazard in a workplace, we need to find some strategies that are adequate and appropriate to equip workers to work safely amongst those hazards. Any other thoughts, any hazards that we missed here? Okay. And again, I wanted to focus on it briefly through this up here. I always like the Swiss cheese model of incident prevention here, just because we can focus very heavily on supervision, on this this end here, very close to where the incidents are occurring. This last line of defense, if you will, between something happening and something not happening. Hey, I caught somebody who wasn't wearing their safety glasses, and I asked them to put them on before they use that angle grinder. Or I found somebody who didn't properly chock the wheels of a vehicle, and I or lock the jacks in place before going under that. I caught them, we corrected it before something catastrophic happened. That's pretty darn close to where that incident is occurring. And I would like to encourage us to focus before that. This is coming back to those system elements. We are far better served to focus on those system elements and create, expectations and systems that lead workers into the way of working safely, as opposed to just focusing on supervision and correcting constantly, because this can also come across as negative for those workers who are constantly receiving that correction, especially if they feel like they didn't receive adequate instruction in the first place. And that can also lead to them not necessarily bringing forward concerns. So I'd like to get a sense, we can throw the poll up here. So, how do you currently feel about your training methods? And please be honest here. This is a safe space. None of these, I don't see who answered what on these. Are you pretty confident? Are they phenomenal? You're pretty confident people know what they're doing. Workers report concerns, and you don't see too many injuries. Pretty good. We do some theory hands-on, and stuff gets recorded. Meh. That was my favorite one. If you're finding yourself going, maybe that's the one there. We could do improvement. We need people out there working as soon as possible. We'll teach them how to do things as we go. And so, yeah, I see people, there's quite a few, and nobody's rated themselves as phenomenal, and kudos to you for that level of mindfulness. I probably wouldn't, rate myself phenomenal as anything. There's always room for improvement, but, for those of you that are in a pretty good state here, that's awesome. I'm glad to hear that. There's always some improvements we had, and I still hope that you take something of value from the tips I'm going to provide you in a few minutes here. For those of you that answered met or needs improvement, I appreciate the mindfulness there. Hopefully the reason you're here, and I think we can respect that, you're hiring people, you might be on the smaller end of things. You need people out there working as soon as possible. Time is money in a business sense, and I get that, but we can efficiently build in some safety training, and we can equip people to do work safely. I always like to remind people it is far less costly in the long run for your business to keep people safe than it is to have people getting injured. So, with that in mind, what are some of the strategies that you use to train your workers with limited or no prior experience, these vulnerable workers that we're talking about? And again, you can click more than one here. So classic document review of policies and procedures, computer-based learning modules, job shadowing for specific periods of time, equipment type sign-offs, or do you use the ATS levels 100, 200, and 300 through ADAM and the OTDA, or others? If you've answered other, I'm very interested to hear what other approaches you use as well. Okay, so we've got a good mix here. If you have answered other, if you don't mind typing into the chat box what you would consider your other method, I would love to hear that. But as I just review the feedback here, not uncommon to workplaces, we see heavy focus on review of our policies and procedures, that classic information, hey, review this and then work this way. Understandable. We need stuff written down in a consistent fashion that we can hold people to it. At the end of the day, something happens and somebody does something one way. Well, we want to be able to refer back to what was the expectation? How did we expect that work to be done? Computer-based learning modules, awesome. Finding some efficiency there. Hey, we can build in some interactivity with this. We can build in knowledge checks with this. These are very, very valuable, but we're still on the theoretical end of things as we're getting along here, this idea of job shadowing. And I'm hoping for those of you that answered here, you do use a variety of these methods. Job shadowing is great. Some people, myself included, it's one thing to read and what the procedure is, follow through on a learning module, get 100% on the quizzes, and then be faced with actually doing it. That type of motor learning is really critical. And if not provided that opportunity to shadow and be able to ask those questions in the moment of someone who's experienced and make those course corrections for ourselves, be very hugely beneficial. Okay, practical use, fire extinguishers, proper lifting techniques. I love to hear that. Hey, We reviewed what we're going to do. We reviewed how we're going to do it. Shadowed somebody. Now let's see you do it. And let's sign you off on it. I very much like, especially in your type of environment, something we talk about in, for example, high school tech shops, high school mechanic shops, this idea of equipment specific sign-offs. I think that is a hugely valuable type of strategy. I'll talk about that in a little bit with your type of seasonal occupation. Hey, we can get people up to speed, and then when there's an opportunity to, we can train them on something, and we can get those sign-offs on kind of a rolling basis. One potential pitfall of that, though, we need to make sure that people are only using the equipment that they are signed off on to use, and that when given, faced with one of those opportunities to train somebody on it, that it's done in the same rigorous fashion that we would expect it to be done. So again, what sorts of challenges do we see faced with onboarding workers? So uncertain of training needs. Well, we don't really know what we need to do. Unclear responsibilities for worker training. Hey, we know we need to train these people that have never done this before. We're going to have a whole bunch of these tires come in to get changed. We're going to have full books every day for the next 2 months. Well, okay, who's going to train everybody? If that's not clear, that is a very pivotal starting point to make sure that, well, who is going to be, or who is or who are going to be responsible for training these workers. Lack of structure is a big one as well. Again, if I come back to those 3 buckets of information, instruction, and supervision, those documented step-by-step procedures, or whatever you want to call them, that consistent documented way that we're going to go about things. Hey, if you're using these various methods, well, how are you tracking that? How do you monitor that someone's done their document review, they've done X amount of job shadowing, and then we can give them that sign off? If we don't have any level of structure to that, if it's an, oh yeah, no, sign that person off, is that actually relevant sign off, or we want to be doing that on a more objective basis? Again, just inherent with this type of seasonal workforce is this idea of limited to no prior experience, low risk perception, and the cultural or language factors. That is a huge challenge to overcome. And I promise, I keep saying in a few minutes, I do have some resources, some tips or tricks. I'm going to get to that here quite quickly. But all these we've talked about before. One I didn't mention, workload requirements, limit the training time. This is that idea of, hey, we need to get people out there as soon as possible. So, if the person who's responsible for that workplace training, or for that worker training, is just trying to get those sign-offs and get people out onto the floor, is that really creating the best, is that imparting the best safety knowledge, or is that imparting a message that, hey, this person didn't really care about training, they weren't really invested in my training, they might have missed some things, they weren't comprehensive, they didn't, address my questions. That training quality is still, that training rigor is still important, is critical with onboarding these workers. This one here, I didn't mean to cross that out, I went to circle it. Peer pressure. This idea of, if you have a disconnect between what we've said we're going to do on paper, and then, come here, this is how we actually work, that's going to be a problem. That's typically, that inherently involves, hey, there's something that's trying to be shortcut. We're not, this is somebody trying to say, hey, no, we don't do certain things that are on that paper, on that procedure, because it allows us to find some efficiency, allows us to do things quicker. Ultimately, in those situations, while well-intentioned, I'm all for coming up with good ideas to figure out ways to do work faster. If people have good ideas that can be done safely, great. Continuous improvement. That's a classic Toyota lean management principle there. But if those shortcuts are done in a conscious fashion to bypass or not fulfill certain safety requirements, that's what we very strongly need to avoid. And the last one here, I've seen this in workplaces past, the most shocking of which come from my time in healthcare, was this, we're going to train somebody, or we're going to put them through that doc review, training, job shadowing, but then no evaluation. There's no evaluation. Hey, that person actually knows what they're doing. I'm going to sit back. I'm going to observe them doing the job, looking for those quality elements, looking for those safety checks, and make sure that they do, they check all the boxes that they're supposed to check in that process, whatever it is. If we're not doing that, okay, yeah, you've done your training, get on the floor. It's like, okay, am I really ready? Does that person actually feel they're ready? So what are some I'd say other challenges, but what are the key what are some of the major challenges the main challenges you face when onboarding these new temporary seasonal workers? And then I promise these last 4 or 5 slides here, I have the best practices that you've come here to learn about. But I like to talk about the why. I think the why is important here, because it, if we if we try to train people without really embodying that why and that caring about keeping them safe and imparting those safety elements of the work, I think that comes through in the training. What are some challenges? What are the main challenges you face when onboarding new workers? Anybody in the chat? If we've talked about all of them, then I'll be flattered there, and we'll roll with that. So just in the interest of time, let's keep going here. So again, I like to impart the why from a due diligence perspective. These are your supervisor's duties. So those people in your workplace or your organization who are, training workers, teaching them how to do things. If you look at the duties of a supervisor from the Act, these are directly quoted in there. Supervisors shall ensure workers work in a safe manner, shall wear the PPE that is required in the work, and tell the workers about potential or actual dangers, provide with written instructions where prescribed. Always written, if something's written down, that's a good best practice, and ultimately take every precaution reasonable. I like to highlight these is that, coming back to that importance and that investment in the training by these folks, I think putting the right type of person in these supervisory positions really does, to Dave's point before, set your company culture up for success or challenges. I don't want to say failure, but challenges to be faced. When the right people are in these positions, equipping people to do the work in a safe way, clearly invested in it, and obviously caring for the workers safely, that does come across, whether communicated directly or not. So from a best practice perspective, let's talk about a couple things. As we've said before, and as I've belabored a few times now, you're bringing these workers, these seasonal, temporary, and new workers into a high stress environment that they may never have experienced before. So setting the stage, reason we say first impressions matter, it really does matter. Reinforce, during your facility orientation, reinforce your company's health and safety culture, reinforce that expectation that every employee will work safely, follow procedures, and report hazards. And don't try to just not address things. It can be very helpful to address, young workers' beliefs and insecurities, calling them out. Hey, we don't expect you to be superheroes. We understand you're not going to be perfect right out the gate. And we expect and encourage you to ask questions if you're not sure of something. Again, just acknowledging that can in and of itself encourage somebody to, not hide something. You might say, oh yes, no, we have an open door policy, but is that door actually open? Or is when, somebody tries to come and tell you something, oh yeah, no, can we talk after lunch? I'm on the phone, I'm doing something. Well, is that person actually going to come back and bring forward their concern to you? Or is that really an open door there? What I'm trying to say here is you really need to impart that, no, we care about you, and we do expect you, if you have any questions about anything, stop and come see. I'm talking in the third person as a supervisor here. This idea of leading with safety, reinforcing the employer's commitment to health and safety, reinforcing worker rights and responsibilities, reviewing the key workplace hazards and risks, even hazards and risks that may not apply to, the position you might be hiring somebody into. Being aware and mindful of those things. Hey, this is a hazard that is over in this area, but you're not going to be involved with that in the scope of your job duties. That's still valuable information. That does set up a boundary that tells somebody, hey, here's where you're supposed to interact, and no, you don't interact with that hazardous thing, whatever it is. First aid and emergency procedures, again, very important. So people coming in know, when things go wrong in your facility, if something happens, how can we get people help, or how do we address whatever that emergency may be, whether it's a fire or a spill or a collision. The last point here, acknowledge anxieties. Like I said, that's kind of, especially young people in anxious mode during their first job. This can affect their ability to actively listen. If they're in that training room, if they're in a cohort of their peers, getting told how you're going to be working safely, but they're in their head going, okay, you really need to listen here. You need to not mess up. You need to do this properly. That anxiety is going to undermine their absorption of that material. One thing that's always tough as well is to explain the consequences of not following through on the safety rules. But I do think that's extremely important. When coming in, hey, we're going to tell you what you need to do to work safely, but here's what happens if we catch you. I don't want to say catch you, but if we observe, these requirements not being met, and treating it objectively, not coming at it like, hey, we will penalize you, but hey, we hold everyone accountable to this. And even focusing on the the potential consequences, not just punitively from an employment sense, but hey, if you operate this type of tool or this machine without proper PPE or the proper guard, here's what can happen. Whether that's a sleeve, a finger, or getting something cut off, you want to not be morbid, but drive home the importance of these safe work practices by again focusing on the hazards that they're meant to work around. When it comes to seasonal workers, and especially from an efficiency perspective, you really do need to look internally at what is the job description of these people you're hiring into these positions. Provide role specific information. Don't belabor them with training that doesn't apply to their everyday. This idea of what do people need to know, must know for their core job duties. We're obviously going to spend more time on that, more focus, more effort from a training perspective than, hey, okay, you should know this. There might be, something in your job that we're going to do once a week, once a month, something you should know, but what we can get you working, we'll focus on the core stuff, and then we'll get to that when it comes with the level of rigor like we've talked about. And then there's the could know. Hey, that's all well and good. It's somebody might express an interest, and great, someone's wanting to learn, go beyond the job responsibilities they were hired for. That's awesome. We want to encourage that. That's a value add to your organization there. But if that's not core to their day-to-day, all well and good. Okay, how can we still provide you some knowledge, but we still need you to be doing the day-to-day stuff. That's not what we're going to focus on first and foremost, especially in the context that we're talking about here. This idea of, I don't want to say fast and dirty, but these very condensed 2-month scenario or 2-3 months type windows where the focus here is this core work. We're bringing somebody in to assist with tire changes. That's that must know. That's what we're going to focus on. And if we're going to keep somebody on, we're going to go beyond that. Great, but we need to have some rigor surrounding that as well. Simple and clear language. Again, we are talking about a variety of individuals here who may never have done this type of work before. We don't want to be bombarding people with technical jargon right off the bat, especially if we're doing that in a language they may not be fully familiar with. As I talked about before, highlighting the hazards and risks within the tasks. Hey, here's a step of a process where there is, a hazard or a risk to your person, and here's how we're expecting you to work around that. Accessible and understandable reference materials. I'll talk a little bit about this shortly, but we live in a technological age. I know a lot of organizations, if you're on the larger end, your workers may be equipped with things like tablets and mobile devices. We can leverage those. I talked earlier on about that on the go kind of course correction. Hey, can we make that reference information accessible so much so that somebody's actually likely to use it when they need it in the moment? If it's going to take somebody 5 times as long to get the information than to just take a chance on how they think it's supposed to be done, then they're not going to go get that information. Important piece here, highlight outside of role tasks. Again, as I talked about, seasonal workers here. Here's the lane we expect you to stay in. Here's what we don't expect you to do. Those are very valuable pieces to reinforce with this type of workforce. And on the reporting end of things, however this is done in your workplace, whether this is a form, reporting something to their supervisor or their manager verbally, you need to review that and the expectations surrounding it. Again, we historically see underreporting of hazards and incidents in workplaces, not tire dealers, all workplaces. And workplaces need to know about the things that are happening in order to, be able to target those with things like, hey, with improved types of training. Hey, if we see a lot of people getting injured using the tire balancers or the tire installers, okay, we're going to dedicate some more time and effort to improving their skills and maybe going so further with job shadowing, extra steps to verify, that success of that training. Ooh, I don't know what happened there, but again, the 3 buckets: information, instruction, and supervision. So I know a few of you said that you were using the automotive tire service levels 100, 200, and 300. Great. I think that's hugely beneficial. I'm not familiar. I'm not a tire dealer or tire change expert, but having something standard like that from an industry association perspective is incredibly valuable to you. And I encourage anybody who's not using that to give Adam a call, give the OTDA a call, and start to work yourself through that. That is extremely valuable to you if you're not already using it. Again, we talked about this. equipment specific training and sign up. You don't need to approve everybody on everything to get them out there, to get them working. Focus on what they're going to need to be using frequently, day to day, especially within their job description. And again, if we are going to take that approach of kind of a passport type system, I don't want to say passport, pass card was the word I was looking for, punch card, stepwise approvals. Hey, we're going to sign you off on this equipment. Awesome. We can do that as we go. But, you know, in this high pressure, high volume is the word I'm looking for there, high volume environment, you know, we're going to focus on the equipment, the tools, the core job duties related to that. Other things that I find valuable is in it's all well and good to train people to how things are supposed to go, but you know, train people to what those what are the common types of emergencies we will. If we, you know, it's all well and good to review those. Hey, you know, here's the emergency procedure when you need to use it. Well, those are inherently higher stress scenarios. If there's a fire, chemical spill, something breaking, or a lift falling, whatever that may be. If you've got some emergency drills you want people to do certain things in, to respond in certain fashions, you need to work through those. I come from a lifeguarding background. I come from a healthcare background, and very commonly it was when we saw, it's all well and good in training, but when it came to actually responding to those emergencies, we would fairly frequently see, you know, slips and lapses. Oh yeah, no, I knew I was supposed to grab the spill kit from here. I was supposed to garb up with this. These higher pressure emergency type scenarios we want to get in front of, and we can equip people with those. So if those are situations, whether fire, spill, you want to equip people for, you know, give them some time in the saddle, run some drills, whatever that needs to look like, to make sure that people can respond in a calm, collected, and competent fashion when those situations do arise. I talked about supervision. Information and instruction are really geared on the worker end of things. This is equipping people for success, allowing them to know what they're supposed to do, how to do it safely, how to respond in certain scenarios. But on the supervision end as well, I can't stress enough that you need to ensure the competency of supervisors. They need to be actively present and involved and lead by example. And again, we're going to talk about this in far greater detail in the session next month. What does this actually look like in a seasonal type of workforce? In situations like yours, because very likely these supervisors are also on the floor doing the work while trying to supervise and monitor and hold everyone accountable to the workplace expectations at the same time. It's the city of I love this image we put together here, this coach, this referee, and player. I hope a couple of you relate to that almost too closely. It's a lot to expect of these individuals, and we need to equip supervisors with the right tools to manage and hold the workers to the way that we need, expect them to be working safely. Sorry. You know, one of the key principles here I talk about in supervision is consistent corrections and clear communication. It gets much harder to correct people when you've let things slip by on a frequent basis. It's the same as if my toddler asked me for, I'm trying to think of something there. You know, she asked me for, you know, some fruit gummies one time after school, and I say, no, not today. She says, but every day you give me them after school. Hey, well, now, you know, that, I hope that's a relevant analogy there. I've been hanging out with my toddler a little bit too much, maybe, but the point there, that's harder to do than if I said, no, we don't get those fruit gummies after school. We get those after dinner, for example. This idea of correcting the same things when you see them in the moment, and being respectful and clearly communicating the expectations is absolutely critical. One of the things we've helped to equip supervisors, we encourage safety talks, regular check-ins. You might use strategies in your workplace like daily, you know, huddles, tailgate talks, toolbox talks, daily kickoff meetings, whatever you want to call them. These are very valuable. Your supervisors can leverage these to, you know, check in on things, to keep safety top of mind. So this is a clickable link on the screen there too. We do have a series of what we call safety checks that I encourage your supervisors to use, and many of these relate to equipment and tools and things that are present in your tire dealers, tire change shops. And again, these will all be available to you after the session here as well. Some additional best practices I wanted to highlight as well, some things that I think could be valuable to you in this type of occupation. Again, I wanted to again I don't mean to cross that out, directly plug the ATS levels 100, 200, 300 if you aren't already using those. These safety pledges I've found are valuable as well, and really to establish that commitment on every end for health and safety. It's really not much beyond that page, but I think it does set up, especially if you're doing this upon bringing someone into a workplace. Something like this can very much put your health and safety culture on the forefront, kind of like I said, to set that stage very nicely. If you click on these, you can open these for the workers, the supervisor, and employer. And it's really a pledge that says, hey, I as a worker commit to, following through on the procedures that I'm trained to and working in a safe fashion. And supervisors commit to, consistently correcting these behaviors and holding people accountable and providing appropriate information, instruction, and supervision to these workers. I think these safety pledges can put it on the forefront and clearly articulate that quite nicely. Something I would hope and potentially find some value in for yourselves. There are lots of translation technologies or services that are available now. So again, if you have cohorts of workers or you are finding some disconnects, disconnects between language competencies or language barriers there, there's plenty of translation technologies are available. I know I'm an Apple user. For example, I translated the back of a German or an Austrian Jello the weekend, take a picture of it, and it directly translates into whatever, like translated from Austrian to English, which I speak. I could translate into any other language that would speak to that person. We'd obviously want to verify that. We'd want to make sure it's accurate, but these types of services and technologies can be hugely beneficial to equipping people and getting people the information they need to work safely in their language of understanding. Digitizing things like quick access reference materials that might include things like pictures, videos, or other visuals. Might involve, hey, a QR code that pulls open a video of somebody setting up a tire balancer or a tire installer appropriately with the call outs to the appropriate safety steps. 2-minute video, I can watch that in a moment. Is that really going to put us behind? If that's going to set someone up for success, it's going to prevent them from making a mistake in the future. It's that ongoing learning. Hugely, hugely valuable types of measures there, sorry. And it's not difficult. These are things I've seen, for example, high schools use these types of QR codes with direct links to training videos. For example, here I put a direct link to the Health and Safety Act here. One of the changes this year in the act, now allow virtual posting to health and safety materials. So you want to put a QR code here at the machine that shows you how to use it, that pulls open the procedure. Great, put that information, make it accessible to people, and they're far more likely to use it. I wanted to open the floor. I wanted to ask you if there's any, and again, this is an idea Dave mentioned, we used to call these network knowledge exchanges, safety connections. We do want to provide an opportunity if you have any best practices in your respective organizations that you'd like to encourage others to use on this topic as well. Please, if you have any examples to share, we'd love to hear from you.
Adam, you mentioned something just a few seconds ago about translation services, and I know based on my experience and talking to other individuals as well, one of the hurdles that have come up when training, especially new folks to the province, is communication barriers, right? And we have a couple aspects to communication, one being linguistics, which is my big word of the day. Glad I got that out early. I don't have to worry coming up with a big word at the end of the day, but also like body language and stuff like that. And we got to remember too, when we're training somebody whose maybe first language is not English, sometimes when we speak, if we speak too fast, they might not be comprehending or understanding what we're trying to say. So a lot of times too, and it was explained to me that they have to take that information and translate it to their first language and then go from there, trying to figure out what we're talking about. But as they're doing that, they may miss what we're saying.
Yeah.
So that said, you brought up a good point about being speaking in simple terms, slow, and making sure that they understand. So that was one of the barriers that I wanted to mention.
I think you made a good point there about. I was talking about body language, right? And it's one thing if I'm an instructor at the front of the room and I'm engaged with you and talking, we're really expressive facial expressions and tone of voice, and hey, no, here's the safety aspects of this machine, and we're hands-on and we're showing you how to use it, versus somebody who's okay, and you can see on the side here, here's how we operate this piece of equipment. and you're going to do this step, you're going to do this step, you're going to do this step, you're going to do this step. And which of these people is more invested in the training? And I think regardless of what we're talking about, you're going to inherently pay attention to one of those people over another, and inherently within that absorb more information as opposed to just being, bored.
Yeah, and I do have a question for you, Aidan, and that is when people are developing their training program, how do they determine what to train on? You mentioned emergency services. You mentioned doing a hazard identification, risk assessment, and training on the different hazards within a workplace. But how can somebody, like after today's call, how can somebody go back and say, okay, I need to develop a training program or evaluate my training program? What am I doing here?
Yeah, I think a good starting point, I always come back to the, health and safety. Again, that we're talking about health and safety related training here. So what are the hazards that we're trying to train people to work safely in and amongst? It's all well and good to teach somebody how to use a tire changer and talk about, hey, here's the step 1, step 2, step 3. But if we don't call out the hazards within that, hey, during step 1, there's a risk to your fingers of X type due to, reaching into this type of machine. So you're going to want to use this type of PPE or de-energize this type of thing. Going beyond that, hey, here's what you do, to the here's why you do it. If you wanted to evaluate, if I was somebody evaluating my training, I've already got something in place, I'd be looking for some of those elements to reinforce the reasons why we do things a certain way for safety's sake.
Yeah, and I see you have psychosocial there too. Yeah. So, and that's becoming more of a big piece, right? And I find training programs will focus a lot on tools or what some of the hazards are. But if we look at psychosocial, I'm wondering how many folks out there, or even in general, would have training on how to handle a negative customer, especially if they're customer-facing members of our team. How do you handle different situations? And should something like that be built into the training program, Aidan? What are your thoughts on that?
It absolutely should. It depends on, in a type of organization, if we have customer-facing folks who are also, those individuals who are doing the tire changes themselves, then okay, we need to address both of those hazards equally amongst that position. Or are we bringing somebody in on a seasonal basis to just, support the front counter type staff? Okay, we're going to pay, we're going to focus on the customer service type of things, and we don't need to concern ourselves as much with the hazards regards to how do you operate these types of equipment.
I'm going to ask Adam Moffat to come on camera as well. Just want to get his thoughts on what, Adam, just what are your thoughts? Like, what do you see in the industry that is happening with training, and what are some of your best practices just based on your experience?
Training is, I think it right now is largely depending on the locations. So I think when you get into a lot of your larger multi-location sites, they probably have more in-depth training programs. They probably have a corporate training program, and they probably have trainers within their organizations as well that go site to site. I think the bigger challenge is when you get into the smaller shops, maybe the 1 or 2 shop locations, a couple of bays, a couple of employees who don't have a health and safety committee. Yeah. This is where, we're really pushing the ATS training that we deliver back to the tire shops. Now, the one thing that may be a little bit challenging with the ATS training is we focus specifically on job aid training. We don't necessarily focus on the health and safety aspect, like onboarding new employees and so forth. So I think there's definitely a gap there. And, the onboarding of new employees can be challenging for a lot of businesses, especially smaller businesses where, maybe the owner operator is also a technician and he's the person working at the front counter, and they don't have time available. So, that to me is probably a bit of a gap that we need to start closing in on. The biggest challenge with that is, and when I talk to members, they say it often, and I get caught up in it as well, is when you are a small shop, it is a lot to undertake with onboarding, health and safety training. So, I know we're working through some different things with WSPS on, how do we streamline that, or checklists and so forth. But I would say that's probably one of the biggest gaps is, this is an interesting sector, right? You have mega giants in the sector, and then you have a lot of what I would say mom and pop style shops.
Yeah.
So, you know, a shop with 1, 2, 3 bays, maybe 3 or 4 employees. And, you know, that's a big gap that we have to start backfilling and try to help a lot of these people. You know, the other thing I would say is too, when you look at the distribution across the province of shop types, I think in Ontario we have 5,600 or 6,000 registered tire sellers. So those are people who sell
Wow.
tires in the province. But when you look at that, you know, predominantly that is going to be your small to medium sized shops, right? The larger shops, the multi-chain shops, they occupy a great deal of that space, but they don't occupy a majority of that space. So, you know, there's a void there.
Yeah.
And that's why I wanted a lot of the resources. I did throw these up on screen here. These are all clickable links. So, and I do respect the plight of the small business. I come from, my best friend and I, we started a bike shop in high school, and, you know, we had to do that ourselves. It's a lot to be tasked with. How do we create the safe system that we work in while having to do that work as well? And there's only so many hours in a day, as we're talking about there. We've tried to do a lot of, you know, we tried to give you a leg up. So there's a lot of these resources on here. I strongly recommend. I've referenced things that go beyond our WSPS resources. These are workplaces can take these, run with them, and if you are in that position of a small business, that's, you know, one, am I checking the right boxes with my training? Am I, you know, using some of these checklists, some of these kind of assessment tools can be a good, you know, self-reflection type of opportunity. And we do have the one I wanted to draw reference to here. We are doing many more multi-language safety resources. We are big on churning those out now. So please keep abreast of those.
Yeah, and we'll be sharing these resources in a follow-up email with everyone. And in the interest of time, I just want to thank Adam for joining us this morning. It's always great to see you. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
And Aidan, thank you very much for putting this together in your time. And thanks to all the folks out there that joined us for taking the time out of their busy day, being part of this call, and hope you got something out of it. And feel free to share it with your work colleagues.
Yeah.
And that's all we have for today, folks, and we're going to sign off. That said, be safe out there, and we'll see you soon.